Aloha everybody, and I'm happy to be here to spread the word. I do have a little keiki auhuhu plant if you're interested in looking at it, and I do have some sample seeds. I guess just don't plant them around Troy. But what I'm going to be talking about, two parts of this talk. First is growing the auhuhu plant, and then the second part is actually doing a field test with the auhuhu. So a little bit of background. Historically, auhuhu is one of the 30 or so Hawaiian canoe plants, which means it was brought by the voyaging Polynesians. That would include things like food plants like coconut, uwala or sweet potato, ulu or breadfruit, and because there wasn't a whole lot of food to eat, so they brought a lot of their food with them, and this is one of the plants that they brought. And so here is, let's see, excuse me. Akia is actually a native Hawaiian endemic plant. There's kind of a species complex that was found here. And so we tested both, and then there's my dog there who's in scale 4. That's a full-grown auhuhu plant, so we grew a bunch of auhuhu at campus and also at my house. So background, there's a really good paper put out in the 1920s by the Bishop Museum, and they documented how auhuhu was used in Hawaii. And basically they would grab the whole plant, you can see in the picture here, they would pound it with a rock, put it in the tide pool, or local ia, or wherever they were, maybe a portion of a river or a small stream or river, and they would stun the fish would come up to the surface, they would net them, and they would have their dinner. So we started to cultivate auhuhu, got the idea talking with Leo and Howard, and also with some native Hawaiian practitioners. So we started some small-scale testing of growing the auhuhu plant. We got original seeds from Greenwell Garden, from Peter Van Dyke, and then we started, there's one of my sons there, and then we also got a wild seed source. In the wild, it's pretty hard to find, although I guess Megan has some good spots to go, but because of the feral ungulates and sheep and everything, it's an ice cream plant, it's a legume, so it's quite hard to find in the wild compared to what the literature says, around the turn of the 20th century. So we just took the seeds, we didn't really harvest any from the wild, and we started to grow them out. So we've had mixed success, but I think we're finally getting down how to grow it really successfully. The best germination is soaking it in warm tap water overnight, and then we can harvest it in about 4 to 5 months. We can prune it. Instead of pulling the whole plant out, we can prune it, and we can either freeze the plant, or we can dry it, which we'll talk about later. It also really is a good intercrop because it's a legume. It adds to your garden, so I have like peas and beans and other things that I've grown it with at home. At school, so after we grew it out, we used poi pounders on the left here, and we did it really the traditional way with putting in tilapia in a kiddie pool. And then that's not quite as exact as putting it in a blender, straining out the leafy matter. We call the strained part the auhuhu salad, straining out the salad portion, and then putting that into the tanks and have the students record the time it takes this time with different concentrations. We tested both fish and non-target species. So it, of course, works well in fish, that's why the Hawaiians brought it. But we also were really concerned about the native invertebrates, some of which are listed as endangered species. So we didn't test it on the endangered species, but we did test some near relatives of the damselflies. Also, we tested shrimp, pretty much all the invertebrates we could think of, opaiula, and even brackish water snails. Snails are not too exciting and they don't move very much, but Leo helped devise a way here to see if the snail moves and if they are surviving the auhuhu treatment. And the good news was we didn't have any mortality, very, very low or to no mortality from auhuhu to the invertebrates. So just real quickly, here's some of the results. We found that that guppies stun a little bit faster than tilapia. So you can see that the more plant we have, the faster it's stun. We did test akia. Akia wasn't nearly as good. Also, akia has a problem in that it is very, very slow growing. It's quite rare now. And so auhuhu just is way more toxic than akia, which does work if you're in a pinch and you could use it. But we decided to just focus all our efforts on auhuhu. Okay, so in conclusion, we found that just a little bit of auhuhu would would stun the fish in these tanks, just like 1 gram, which is a tiny amount. We used everything, basically, just like the Hawaiians did, the roots, the stem, the leaves, twigs, everything. Okay, and this is just real quick, a back envelope calculation from doing the test with students is that it would take about 4,500 pounds to get rid of the tilapia in Aimakapā Pond. So that's quite a bit. However, if you compare that to Rotenone, it would be about 150 liters would be needed, which is not very much. So that's just a comparison. So this spring, February, March, we decided to do some field tests of auhuhu. And so we got together. This was led by the Park Service, Kailea, and Amanda and Sally Beavers at the park, and Leo and Nico and Howard from the park also came out. So we processed about 18 pounds of auhuhu, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it took a lot of effort to do that. So we took the auhuhu and we put it in the 5-gallon buckets. We transported it to, this is pond 18. This is a large pond, which in retrospect, I'll talk about why this may not have been the best pond to test. But we put it in there, and then we also brought some, I have a video clip, but I don't have it on here, but the video, we were pounding it, basically the traditional way. And this is kind of cool because at this pond there was like depressions where the Hawaiians hundreds of years ago had pounded whatever they're pounding, and so it's probably the first time this area had this done in maybe a couple hundred years. So we did that with fresh auhuhu and then the freshly blended auhuhu, and so our results were pretty good. In that pond, we did this in March, the tilapia were entirely eliminated, and most of the guppies were eliminated. However, some guppies did remain. The guppies were harder to get rid of. The opaiula returned by 26th of May. However, they were gone in October. So what happens is this pond is connected at really, really high tides to the main Aimakapā pond. So they were able to kind of re-infiltrate and re-get in there. And we also, in October, just a couple weeks ago, the Park Service and Megan and Hawaii Wildlife Fund went back to do another test with strictly Rotenone. And here is that test. And this didn't go as well, and you can see right here, this is the Rotenone. So only a little bit of Rotenone is used compared to, say, like 18 pounds of auhuhu. But, and the Rotenone was dyed, and so here is actually the main Aimakapā pond. So it was within like 45 minutes or so, the Rotenone was going out. Unfortunately, it wasn't strong enough to kill anything in the main pond, but I am a little happy to say that the auhuhu killed all the tilapia, whereas in this test in October to try to get rid of the tilapia, none were killed. So the auhuhu was definitely has some advantages. Now, this was a real success story. This is pond 54. So this pond here is a smallish pond, and it had it never had opaiula or dam supplies observed because there were guppies in there. So here's Howard putting in the Rotenone and the dye in there. And one thing that I'd never really realized is how these Anchialine ponds are not really ponds, they're almost, you need to think of them as more of a river. Because you can see, if I had a video, you could just see the dye flowing out. And it's a really, almost like a strongly flowing river. So this was treated 3 times, and the guppies, we never could get rid of them. So what we did is we came back at night, we got some auhuhu, we pounded it the traditional way, and then we got a PVC pipe and we put it up as far in the lava tube as we could get. So it kind of like infiltrated and got down into the pond. It was like a time release way to use Rotenone, because that's what's the chemical in the auhuhu. And so after we did that, we got rid of all the guppies. And the cool thing is the next day, the endangered damselfly and the opaiula were back. So, and they hadn't been observed there before. So that was pretty cool. Okay, I'll just talk about this real briefly. This was a field test of another pond, and we had run out of Rotenone. So we decided to use the auhuhu salad, basically, that was left over, and that didn't get rid of them. So that wasn't a success, but it was just kind of an afterthought. However, it was retreated with Rotenone, and there was, the fish have not come back since then. There'll be more talk about this later. So in conclusion, auhuhu is an effective time-release supplement to Rotenone. Pond 54, we couldn't get rid of them 3 times because of the flowing water of the Anchialine pond, we couldn't get rid of them until we used auhuhu. It's, however, you know, it is higher effort, greater cost to use auhuhu. And here's the road gnome on the right. It's really effective for small infested pools. So in retrospect, the first pond we did, we probably shouldn't have done it. We should have gone to like this pond 38, which is a really small pond, would have been perfect for auhuhu, but you know, we're learning how to use it. It hadn't been used in, you know, I mean, legally in 100 years or so. And the treated ponds, they shouldn't be connected to any of the larger ponds. And also, using auhuhu, it allows Hawaiian students to decolonize the invasive species impacts on their cultural heritage. And as last few talks have shown, these invasive species are really impacting the cultural heritage of Native Hawaiian students. So some of the future projects that we'd like to start is to treat the royal ponds with auhuhu at Pu'u'ohonua National Historic Park. So we feel at the park that there's several possibilities. First, CO2 wasn't really effective on getting rid of tilapia at the park, and you can see that all the mounds there, it's really unsightly and at these royal ponds. So we feel that maybe there could be several things. We could use auhuhu in conjunction with road gnome. We could maybe just do auhuhu alone if we could grow it. I don't think we would need like 5,000 pounds, maybe 100 or 200 pounds might do it. I don't know, we've got to do a bunch of measurements on the pond size and all that. And Hawaiian students should definitely take the lead to give this some cultural legitimacy to help restore their culture, and I think that would get buy-in from the Hawaiian community as well. Okay, so I'd like to thank especially the Park Service people, Sally, Kailea, Amanda, and Jackson, and Megan Lamson, and also, of course, my co-authors. And any questions? Yes.
Do you have the dose response curve for this material?
We do. In fact, kind of what I showed you with the students, basically we have a time response curve up here. So that's kind of one of our curves as far as time versus weight. So, and we found that, you know, we do have a lot more detail. I just didn't want to throw in a whole bunch of detail. But yeah, so that's how we were getting the calculations to how much would be needed to like treat the whole Aimakapā pond, for example.
So it seems to me that the dose you would use for a pond would be a function of the volume of the pond and the flow of the pond. So you measure the flow, you probably got this, but you measure the flow as a function of volume, you get a better idea of how much you get.
Right, the question was measuring the flow as a function of
The volume
of the,
and
you know, right, and that is a complex thing, and that's why we're leaning toward using dye completely. And it's hard to get a handle on these pools are really rocky. The substrate's super rocky. It's even hard to net the fish out because it tears your net. So, but it's a complicated thing, and that's more for a hydrologist to answer. But that is a great thing we need to take into account. We were debating whether we would do it at high tide or low tide, when we're concentrated, or when the tide's coming up. It's a really complex question to get at. Yes?
Do you think that, I know you said they weren't kind of like rivers, but do you think there would be a safe way to treat the rivers? Because like the Wetlands was also infested with guppies, so do you think that would also potentially work?
I mean, well, there is a way to neutralize rotenone with potassium permanganate as a drip station, but when you get into something like the Wailuku, then you're going to have a lot of public resistance, I feel. I think that's why maybe smaller, discrete Anchialine ponds are better. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd love to get rid of the invasives that way too, but I'm not sure you'd get public buy-in. I don't know. I could be wrong. Yes?
I was wondering what the ideal growing elevation climate for auhuhu is, and if you're looking for community partners to grow it.
Well, I brought a bunch of seeds that I'm happy to give out. So I brought some seeds for people. Troy's not going to be happy, but I brought some seeds. No, I'm just kidding, Troy. But the question is the ideal growing climate. I was growing them up at campus, at the Kamehameha Schools campus in Cal. It's very, very wet. I must get 250 inches of rain there, and I was having die-offs there. Oops, that was my alarm. And down where I live near the ocean, it's much, much drier and it's much better. And so that's maybe 90 to 100 inches a year, and they do great down there. Although sometimes they'll die off if we get too much rain, but like the Greenwell Garden in Kona is perfect. More of a drier, so they do tend to like drier areas, and sometimes I've had them, die when we get too much water. So sometimes at Kamehameha Schools it'll work, and sometimes it won't. Leo.
So I have time for a comment. So with this auhuhu, it's gonna, you really have to conduct like bioassays to see the strength, because it can vary from season to season, from plant to plant, from plant part to plant parts, and flowers, leaves. So what we did here, we had multiple colonies that we just combined and did tests before we used it in the field to see whether it was potent enough, to kill tilapia, and you go from there. And then in running water, in Rotenone, in western streams, they use drip stations to drip out Rotenone, and then maybe if they just want to kill the fish in a kilometer reach, then they'll have a drip station of potassium permanganate to neutralize the Rotenone. So you can do that in flowing water. It's just more of a challenge.
Okay, thank you. And I do have some auhuhu seeds for anyone who would like.